You are listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxshall, in which I chronicle my life and attempts to become a professional writer by, doing some writing daily, hopefully. Hello, it's Friday the 19th of July 2024. You're listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer. And I thought I might have a little rant today because I'm not doing any writing because I've got to leave for work in about 2.5 hours. And so I've got other things I need to do today. But I thought I'd have a little rant about the state of music at the moment. Now, one of the things I've been doing for the last few years, mainly since lockdown, is listening to the top 40 because there were artists I'd never heard of that were really quite big at that point. So, for example, I heard a song by a group called The Weeknd. I say a group; it's basically a solo artist who's given himself that name. But yeah, I heard a song called "Save Your Tears" and really liked it. And I'd never heard of The Weeknd. They've been around for absolutely ages. Great song, and I really liked Blinding Lights, is it called? The other one they did about the same time. Great stuff. And I thought, and it's got a very 80s feel to it. I do like sort of 80s music because that's when I was a kid. So I've been listening to the top 40 most weeks since then. And it's very easy to be I'm in my 50s, so it'd be very easy just to go, all modern music is rubbish. But actually, it really isn't. There is some genuinely good stuff out there. However, this is something that was pointed out to me fairly recently, is that there's very little English music in the English top 40. I'll give you an example. No, I won't, because I've just pressed the wrong button on my phone. Hang on. There we go. So I think everything in the top 10 is done by an American artist. So you've got Sabrina Carpenter, who has actually had the last 3 number ones, interestingly enough. So Espresso came in at number 1. She then knocked herself off number 1 with a song called Please, Please, Please. So she was at number 1 and number 2. And now they've swapped over again. So Espresso is back at number 1 and Please, Please, Please is number 2. American artist. Espresso is a very good song. I'm not so keen on Please, Please, Please. But then you've got stuff like Tipsy by Shaboozey, Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish. This is all in the top 10. Good Luck Babe by Chapel Roan. Houdini by Eminem. I don't think there's anything in the top 10 that's British. In fact, if I'm right, if I go and look at it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. At number 13, you've got Hozier, which is an Irish act, which is the closest to being British you've got in the top 20 by the look of it. Oh, so no, there's actually a Coldplay track in there as well. And thanks to the football, Three Lions is also in the top 20. But that won't be around for much longer. Certainly by the time next week's chart is compiled, it will have disappeared again. And it's such a shame because there's some great British music out there, but nobody seems to be playing it. And it's the fault of things like Spotify and music streaming. In the 90s, and this is probably a bit of a crass oversimplification, but in the 90s, our main radio music network, BBC Radio 1, decided to stop playing as much foreign music, and I believe they set themselves a percentage playlist target of a certain amount. There had to be at least a certain percentage of British music, and I don't know what it was, but I suspect it was quite high. And as a result of that, there was a Britpop boom. You had people like Blur, Oasis, Supergrass, Suede, absolutely tons of British bands that did really, really well. And I wish we were there now, because as much as I enjoy some of the top 40, there's some really good music in here. I didn't realise how few homegrown acts there were. So the last number 1 that was by a British artist was actually at Christmas. And it was Wham doing Last Christmas. So it was a re-entry. It was purely at Christmas now, because streaming is taking consideration into the charts. You tend to find the charts fill up for a few weeks with just Christmas stuff before getting back to being normal proper music in January. But yeah, the last number one by a British artist was George Michael. Apparently the one before that was that final song by the Beatles that they released from an old John Lennon recording. I believe it's called Now and Then. It was a good track. But yeah, those are the last two, and it's just shocking. And so nobody seems to be championing English music or British music, and that's such a shame. And also because of the way music works now, because more people listen to streaming than the radio. I think if Radio 1 and the music networks made the same decision now to prioritise British artists and British bands, I don't know if it would have quite the same effect as it did in the 90s, which is such a shame. And also the other thing I found out the other day, and this is through listening to something, I saw something on the internet, it was actually Richard, can't remember his name, the guy off Point, or used to be on Pointless, was saying that in the 1990s, in the first half of that decade, the first 5 years, there were 146 weeks of bands being at number one. The following decade, in the first 5 years, there was 141 weeks of bands being at number one. How many weeks of bands being at number one have there been in the first, well, up until now in this decade? 3 weeks. So it's gone down from like 140 weeks and nearly 60% of the number one occupancy being by bands down to almost nothing. And again, one of those bands that got to number one of those weeks was the Beatles. So yeah, music really has changed. It's all about solo artists and collaborations, and very few bands getting to number one. And there's no British music. So come on, everybody, listen to British music if you're in Britain. I mean, we've got such a vast selection, you know, because British music is Welsh, Scottish, English, and arguably Irish. So yeah, I'm so disappointed because I've been listening to the charts for about 4 years now, and it's taken somebody to point out to me that nearly none of the acts I'm listening to are from the country I come from, which is a stark contrast to when I listened to music in the 90s. Anyway, that's my rant over. I'm going to Naples in Italy later today, so hopefully tomorrow's podcast will be brought to you from Naples, and I'm planning to do a little bit of writing on Chapter 3 of Empress of the Trees. Take care, thank you for listening, bye-bye. You have been listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxall. Thank you for tuning in to my random ramblings, and if you'd like to know more about me or my projects, visit my Linktree at linktr.ee/Richard Wright, capital R, capital W. Thank you for listening.